Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at temporals. So the temporals that I'm going to introduce today are after, before, once, when, until, till, which is until shortened, as soon as long as, by the time, and the moment. Okay. So a temporal phrase consists of two clauses. Now, what do I mean by two clauses? So if you think of a conditional sentence, let's put a conditional sentence, do the comparison between the two. So if let's say, if you play the match well, you will win. Right? If you play the match well, you will win. In the case of a conditional such as this, you have two clauses. You have two almost independent sentences. Let's see, for example, if we take this one, this clause, the if clause, you play the match well. We have a complete sentence. We have the subject, verb, and the object of the sentence. And also, the second clause here is complete. You will win. Subject, verb, and it carries the meaning of a complete sentence. It's a valid complete sentence. I could just capitalize this, put a full stop, and we have a complete sentence. So a clause can be a complete sentence. This is the easiest way to think about it. We've got here an if clause and a consequence clause. If you play the match well, the consequence is you will win, or a prediction, a consequent. You predict the outcome, the consequence of playing well. So in the temporal, we've got a similar structure. And if I take this as an example, I'll transform it into a temporal. So if I say here, instead of if I say when, then I've got a temporal clause. When this happens, when you do this, this will happen. I can do the same with once. Once you play the match well, so when the time comes that you play the match well, once you play the match well, you will win. Let's say another example with temporals. You can play video games as soon as you finish your homework. So you've still got two clauses, but I haven't put the comma here. If I change the order and put as soon as at the beginning, you'll see that I need to put a comma again. As soon as you finish your homework, you can play video games. So depending on whether the temporal clause is at the beginning or at the end, you will need or not a comma. So if the temporal clause is at the beginning, you use a comma. If the temporal clause is at the end, you don't use a comma. Okay, so there are, moving on, the three types of temporal clause that I want to introduce are with future, with imperative, and with modal verb. All right, let's look at future. Let's look at future. Okay, future, I've got an example here. As soon as I finish my homework, I will come over to your house. So what's the structure? What's the structure we've got? So as soon as, got time expression, or let's say temporal, plus. So the temporal goes with present simple. Temporal goes with present simple. So we've actually got the clause with subject, verb, object. This is present simple verb. And the second clause goes in future simple. So temporal plus present simple clause plus future simple clause. Here the sentence is in present simple. I finished my homework, and the result clause, the result clause is in future simple. I will come over to your house. So just as with conditional phrases, again, we can swap the order of the clauses so that the future clause comes first. So if I take this example here, what we're saying is, just as we did before, we can reorganize the phrase with the future clause first, the temporal in the middle, and the present simple clause that follows the temporal at the end without comma. Let's look at another example. Again, swapped around, so we've got the temporal in the middle. In this case, we've got, let's see what we've got here. We've got future simple. In fact, it doesn't need to be future simple, it can be any future. But it's the point is to predict what will happen at this time using this temporal. So we've got future simple, we've got the temporal, and we've got present simple, which follows the temporal. So the temporal clause takes present simple following it. And if we swap them around, we have, before we arrive, he won't have lunch, though it sounds a little bit awkward that way round. Before we arrive, he won't have lunch. Let's look at imperative. In imperative, we've got time expression. Let's say temporal. So temporal is followed by present simple. When you meet Anna, and then the second clause uses imperative. Please ask her to call me. Please ask her to call me. And here it is. There's the present simple, and there's the imperative. When you meet Anna, please ask her to call me. Again, the temporal time clause can come second, in which case you do not use a comma. So if we switch it around, we get, please ask Anna, in this case we should specify it's Anna, to call me when you meet her. Please ask Anna to call me when you meet her. Let's look at another example. Let's start off with the, let's start in imperative. Watch TV once you tidy your room. So again, temporal plus present simple. Or if we switch it around, we've got once you tidy your room, watch TV. Watch in imperative form. It's a command. So structure, imperative, and time expression, or let's say temporal, plus present simple. Okay, let's have a look at modal verb. Let's have a look at modal verb. So, with modal verb, we've got modal in the first clause. Then we've got temporal plus present simple. All of them have the same structure. What's changing here is on the modal, we've got modal in the non-temporal clause, Here we've got imperative in the non-temporal clause, and here we've got future in the non-temporal clause. So we've got temporal clause, future clause, temporal clause, imperative clause, and temporal clause, modal clause. So you can't watch TV until you tidy your room, present simple. If we switch it around, we've got until you tidy your room, comma, you can't watch TV. Okay then, guys, see if you can transform the following. So, activity. Transform the following conditionals into temporals using one of the temporal expressions mentioned above. And those mentioned above are these ones. The phrases are, let's look at some example sentences. If you learn to cook, I'll come round to your house for dinner, and you have to use future form, I think it is, in this one. Future form. So we've got once you learn to cook, I'll come round to your house for dinner. This is already in the future form, so we can leave it as it is, future simple. 2. If you finish your dinner, I'll be ready to go out. So let's see. If you finish your dinner, I'll be ready to go out. So with this one, I quite like the idea of using by the time. So by the time, llegado este momento, by the time you finish your dinner, this in present simple. So temporal is always followed by present simple. By the time you finish your dinner, we've already got this one in future, so we can leave that as it is. What about modal? So what about if we wanted to change this from future to modal? What if we wanted to change it to modal? Well, it wouldn't make sense because this is a prediction, so I'd have to change this to, I'd have to change the phrase to a permission. Instead of a prediction, it would be, you can go out. Now this is a permission, and with this, but then you can't say by the time. It would be when you finish your dinner, when you finish your dinner, you can go out. This is a permission. Cuando terminas de comer, puedes salir. And imperative would be, for example, once, una vez que, once you finish your dinner, go out. That would be imperative. So let's put both of those down there. Okay. So imperative, once you finish your dinner, go out. So we've got with future, we've got with modal, and we've got with imperative. Okay. If we change it around, we could use as soon as, we could say go out in imperative as soon as you finish your dinner. Tan pronto como. Alright then, guys, see if you can do the numbers 3 and 4 by yourselves. Try to make one sentence in imperative, future, and modal.